Alrighty. So, today I am going to go over for y'all how to create a WHM plugin for cPanel. And if you're not familiar with what cPanel is, then you're probably not going to want to watch this stream. But it is a shared hosting software suite that helps you manage a CentOS server so that you can have various people host their websites on it, WordPress, email, all sorts of things. Works pretty well for a lot of people. And one of the things that you can do with it is make custom integrations to do different things with it and extend the product. What we're going to be talking about today, of course, as shown in the stream, is WHM Plugins. And these are for the admin side of things. Instead of, say, the end user who's logging into cPanel and managing their website, this is the administrator who will be looking at this server and trying to do something special with it, something like that. So as a practical example, I'm going to give y'all guys just a little taste. Don't want to bury the lead or anything like that. I'm going to give you a little taste of kind of the power that this can give you. So right now in WHM, you can, well, let me go over to my scene for that. One sec. So, see this PostgreSQL upgrade here. This is a interface that I have created myself. You can see if we clear out of this and search for PostgreSQL upgrade, there is a plugin here for this. It is a plugin that I've got about probably 80-90% done. And what this is trying to do is, so say I'm the admin, I want to upgrade my Postgres version. Since WHM doesn't come with a Postgres upgrader, it just comes with whatever version ships on CentOS, in this case CentOS 7. It's quite out of date. So there was, in my mind at least, a need for upgrading this Postgres version. So I wrote a UI for doing this along with the backend scripts for doing it and scrolling the upgrade so that you can see what's happening and all that sort of thing, which is why whenever you hit it, you can hit continue, it'll scroll to it, that sort of thing. Right now there's a few errors that I have with it, so I'm not really going to go for that, but I will dive into some of the guts of how this is implemented, as some of the documentation talks about some of the advanced things that you can do, and some of it also talks about some of the documentation isn't quite complete as to some of the newer things that you can do with your plugin configuration. Like right here, you'll note I have a breadcrumb URL for this that goes to Home, Plugins, PostgreSQL Upgrade, and even has a help URL that links to my website with help that I'll be writing soon for it. And of course, it has a link back to the current page. So let's go over to where you would want to start if you're a cPanel and WHM integrator. We would go over to the developer documentation, because this is going to be your main source for going back and consulting with, okay, what do I need to do at this step? I've forgotten what I'm supposed to do here, that sort of thing. So you're going to want to go to the guide to WHM plugins, and that will bring you over here. So it goes through and talks about a plugin development workflow, that sort of thing, where it's saying, hey, let's create the plugin backend code. I don't necessarily think that's always going to be what you're going to do first. Generally what I do is create a skeleton based on the files for it, the installation script, the app config configuration file, and then build upon it once I've been able to install the plugin, because then you can develop as you go. You can have pretty quick feedback as to, oh, did I do something wrong? Did I do something right? That sort of thing. Gives you that manual testability that as an integrator you're going to want to have. So anyways, with that in mind, let's take a look at where I want to start first, which is going to be with either the installation scripts or with your plugin configuration and your interfaces and templates, that sort of thing. So right now, the installation script, you can see it has an example bash script here. Let's copy this example bash script and abuse it for whatever our purposes shall be. So, going to bring up a terminal here. All right. So, you can see right now I just have an image in here that I put in here before the stream that we're going to use as the icon for our plugin. Let's vim install.sh, and I'm going to paste it in. Okay. So we have this check for var cPanel apps. That's generally where any sort of app config is actually going to live. Let me show you kind of what that looks like on my machine here. Var cPanel apps. You can see right now there is the ClamAV connector conf. That's because I have Clam installed. I have Moonin installed, so that's mooninaddon.conf. And there's also Troglodyne API and betterpostgres.conf. And those are for my things here. The Better Postgres is what I showed you earlier. Troglodyne API is a different CGI script that I registered so that I could do XHRs against something resembling a WHM API as far as the returns, the actions that you can do with it, that sort of thing, so that I could have a mostly asynchronous JavaScript-based thing for my UI. But yeah, y'all don't have to worry about that right now. Let's just take a look at our script. Okay, so we're making the script. All right, so this is saying we want, okay, so we're going to name it example plugin. It creates the directory within CGI for example plugin, and we make it to where it has the right permission so it can load. It also makes a directory in whost manager's templates directory. Now, for if you have, like, say, a PHP file that you're loading here instead of, say, a Perl CGI, something like that, you may not necessarily need to load the example plugin here. This is kind of wigging out here, this terminal. Oh, there we go. Oh, no. Okay, I'm going to turn off the transparency on that real quick. Background, solid color. Anyways, so the, oh, no, still doing that thing. Okay, anyways, I'm not going to worry too much about that then, other than to just turn back on the transparency and not worry about it. Okay, so the example plugin is going to have templates if you're mostly doing Perl CGIs. Like if you're doing PHP, you're not going to worry about that sort of thing because PHP is already a templating language. You really don't need an extra template. And then you'll see it registers app config for this example plugin.conf. So this tells me what we need to do is create a few directories within my or a few files rather, within my plugin directory that I have here. So I'm going to need a example plugin.cgi. I'm going to need a image, which I already have here. Let's edit this to be cloud.png. And we're going to put that into user local cPanel whost manager doc-root add-on plugins. Now this is kind of interesting. That directory is never really going to change from add-on plugins, from what I recall. And it basically just is like you got to have these icons there, basically. Although I think this name may be important for our plugin. So I'm going to turn it into example plugin.png. because I think whenever it's looking up the name for the image, you can't like specify what the file name is. It just basically takes it. Okay. So now it's looking for templates over there, so I'm going to have it do that. And so the 755 that it's mostly doing is mostly ensuring that it's got the execute bit instead of 6, that sort of thing. Now, as far as the read permissions, read and execute, you don't necessarily need, I think, read and execute in the whost manager context, except for in the, well, no, you're really never going to need that. You can probably get away with 700 from a security standpoint if you really want to, because all we have to have is the execute bit for root, as we're not really going to be executing it as anything other than root in the whost manager context. Even though you can log in as a reseller, the actual user context is going to be root doing these actions on behalf of the reseller. So I'm going to leave it like that because that's just what the example says. In this case, it really doesn't matter that much. Okay, so then since we're not going to have example plugin under plugin, I'm going to make it just from example plugin.cgi. And my config, I'm just going to have it in the same dir. So, bing. All right. That should get me what I'm wanting right now. Now I have to write a few files. I'm going to open up example plugin.conf. Okay, so this is going to be a config file. Let's go back over to the documentation and take a look at writing that. So the guide here, I believe it's got, instead of that, we're looking at the app config registration here. Here we go. All right, so the app config registration file is going to look like service, user, PHP config. Now that's if you're actually using PHP to execute the CGI. If that's the case, then yeah, you'll probably want to ship a custom PHP INI with it. And you can just install that INI to somewhere under user local cPanel third party. More than likely, you might want to put it in user local cPanel third party PHP. And then maybe name it based on your plugin, something like that, just so that it is pretty obvious where your stuff is. And the URL is going to be important. It's a whitelist for WHM to say, oh, okay, I'm going to go to this path to a CGI. Instead of giving a 404, I'm going to actually load the file that's on the file system. So let's take a look at what a example one does and then write our own. And I believe we may have an example down here. Yes, right. So here's the example down here, but this is like, say, if it was a cPanel one. So this is probably not going to be our most useful one. You can see the PHP handler example that they had there relative to user local cPanel third party, that sort of thing. And you can see it's just third party example.php, that sort of thing. And that will work. But that's certainly not where I'm going to go with this right now. I'm going to go with a Perl example for now because I work for cPanel. I'm slang Perl all day. I've done PHP quite a bit in my day, that sort of thing. Wrote a CMS in it 10 years ago or something like that on really old PHP. But that's not going to be what we're going over today. I may do another example later on what differences you have with a PHP one. Try to go a little bit less in depth and more targeted as to what are the things that you want to do specifically for a PHP plugin instead of a just in general guide to how to do a whost manager plugin. Now, let's take a look, since we have a more cPanel-like example in the documentation here. Let's go to a working one and take a look what it looks like. So this is for this PG upgrade one that I had. I'm going to turn off the line numbers here, set new. well, set no new actually, and so that I can copy and paste this, because why not? Anyways, the service is whost manager, the user is root. I mean, it's always going to be root with whost manager. There's really no other value. The URL, you can see I have CGI Troglodyne pgupgrade.cgi. Again, it's just specifying relative to user local cPanel, where am I going to load this thing? ACLs, this is an important thing to specify. The ACL lists, I don't know if there's actually a list anywhere where you get those ACLs for whatever it is, but it's a way to restrict based on what the user has, say if they're a reseller instead of the root administrator on the machine. So let's say they don't have DNS cluster or something like that, and you don't want them to access it. Say it's some sort of custom thing you're doing for DNS clustering. If you had ACLs equal, like, say, DNS cluster, then you could restrict it to only people with that privilege. Now, since the thing that we're going to be doing today is going to be something that we only want the root user to use, all you have to specify for that to restrict it to only the root administrator is ACLs equals all. I'll probably go into the ACLs some other time, maybe make some sort of stream that's like ACLs and you, going over specifically what the ACLs are and all that sort of stuff. I believe there's even some ways that you can make custom ACLs, so if you want to make specific custom permissions for resellers, you may be able to do that, but that's definitely a more advanced topic for a more advanced time. Okay. So the entry URL, Troglodyne pgupgrade.cgi, that is, the entry URL is kind of interesting. I've noticed on WHM Plugins, the entry URL basically assumes that you're under CGI, so there's really not any other environment other than CGI for you to render these in, and it's basically the same thing as URL here, it's just this instead. Alright, display name. That's where you set the title of your page. Pretty simple. Icon. Name of the icon. Target equals _ self. Implements equals Troglodyne PG upgrade for mine. And the implements key is kind of interesting. It's not something that you're noticing, I think, in the guide to WHM Plugins here. So we have, yeah, you can see like entry URL, all that sort of thing, some relative, whatever. And so, anyways, the target, icon, display name, entry URL, you'll note all for this WHM applications, it documents that, but there actually is another value here whenever you're actually doing this. Now, this target attribute is exactly what you should think if you know HTML. _self means, well, let's load it in the current window, unless you like shift click it, whatever, you know, normal browser behavior. But if you have like some other target, like a different frame that's loaded, now this is more important when WHM was done in a frame set, it will load it within that frame. If it's target equals _blank, it will always open in a new window. Probably something you don't necessarily need to do other than just have self. But the implements field, this is definitely something that's interesting if you're going to make, say, integration links, something like that. And you'll probably, that's a bit more of an advanced topic, but suffice to say it relates to WHM API 1's create integration link, where you can make links from, say, an outside application that has a token that allows it to log in. But then how do I specify the app that I want them to load? So let's say I'm in WHMCS. I want some sort of list of quick links that says, oh, hey, let's go here. If you want to add a quick link there, it needs to specify whatever is in the implements field, and that's how you specify it. So I don't know if anyone for my integration is ever going to do that. Personally, I don't care, but I just want it there in case somebody does. All right. Let's see. No questions in the chat, so let's keep going. All right. So we've got this copied. Let's paste it in. And my icon is going to be example plugin.png. My display name is going to be example thonking plugin. Give me a minute, guys. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we've got the, I'll close the door actually. Okay, so we have this entry URL there, all this sort of stuff. I'm going to change the CGI dir to example.cgi. And my entry URL will be example plugin. And my URL will be CGI example plugin. Example plugin.cgi. Alright. So I think let's change our implements just because we may as well. Implements example WHM Plugin. Right. So let's check our install.sh, make sure that we're actually still naming these the right thing. So we have example plugin.png, example plugin.cgi in the right place. Okay. And we have example plugin conf there. All right, so the things that we need left before we can actually try registering this with app config, running our install sh so that it registers the app config that we just made, and then try to go and load the page. Let's go see. Looks like we have the CGI that we're going to need first off. So let's go over and create our CGI. New example plugin.cgi. All right, and there is an example in our WHM documentation here, which we can look at. Alrighty, let's go for, I believe it is in interfaces. No, that's the plugin template example. So I'm going to need to take a look at plugin files here. Okay. Believe this is it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here is our example in Perl about what to do whenever you are wanting to make an example WHM plugin. All right, so, wrong one. Here we go. All right, so fix that formatting there. Now, what's interesting about these comments, you'll note that it says WHM add-on, example with WHM plugin, example.png, Acls all. You'll note that the same things in those comments are actually specified in your dynamic UI configuration file, which is that plugin, example plugin.conf. I'm not really sure whether those comments are respected or do anything, because whenever I'm taking a look, say, at okay, so pgupgrade.cgi, you'll note in my CGI, I do none of that business. I think it's completely unnecessary to add those comments. It's just, I guess, a way of signifying what's up. But whether you want them or whether you don't, it is what it is, man. Of course, as with any CGI, the main thing that you're caring about here is the shebang that tells you what's my interpreter. For Perl, of course, it's going to be user local cPanel third-party bin Perl, because that is the cPanel Perl interpreter. All right, so this one is setting up the package there. I would rather set up the package at the top because I think that looks better. Whatever. You don't even necessarily have it to be have it be a package. This one's designed as a modulino, which, as a Perl kind of concept, you can look up on various many different Perl blogs, that sort of thing. But the summary of modulino is it is a object-oriented, well, object-oriented as much as Perl is, module, and the way it's designed is so that it can be ran as a binary, as some sort of executable file, but that you could load it, say, in a test, and instead of having it just run immediately, you could wait and have it run by just manually invoking it. That's why you see this run unless caller. If there's caller, that means somebody used the script instead of running it on, say, the command line or via some sort of interpreter line, like a CGI or something like that. Okay, so you'll see the run thing here. The main thing you're going to want to do before you print anything else in any CGI, of course, is going to be printing the content type. If you want, if you're an old hand at Perl and you remember the old CGI module from the, well, old days, mostly in vogue in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, that's still kicking around. If you do want to use that so that you can have some of the niceties that it gives you, especially for manipulating query strings, that sort of thing, the CGI module is available, so you could use CGI if you wanted. But for this purpose, we're not really going to need it because all we really need at this point is printing the content type line and then rendering our template. Now in this case, it's rendering a whost manager template with the template file listed there. And so it's not WHM example plugin in this case because we're naming it example plugin, and we're going to load instead of example.tmpl. Let's take a look at our sh script here. Okay. So there's the templates. Now we should have a template file somewhere here, but it doesn't look like we're actually copying one in, so I'm going to add that here as well. Alright, so cp, oh no, wait, okay, so we are. Yeah, we actually are. So you see we have just copy template star into templates example plugin. So this means we can name it index.tmpl and we're going to be just fine. All right, so let's tab new. Well, so does it actually want it? Yeah, it wants it in a templates dir. So let's make dir templates. Right. Yep. All right. So we've made our templates dir. Let's make our template. All right, templates dex.tmpl. All right. And so now we're going to go back to our WHM template tutorial here. You'll see here we have this basic usage here where it has a wrapper example that shows you master templates, whatever, master.tmpl, supports Bootstrap, add your plugin content here. Basically, the summary is to get the WHM Chrome, like you're seeing this sidebar, the top bar, that sort of thing, any of the WHM footer head content, any of that, so that it looks like a native WHM app, you're going to want to use that wrapper directive for the plugin. So let's see. Go back to the thing to copy here. One of the things that I will also show you is, since the breadcrumb data here, it is a correct example, but it is not a full example of everything that you can do with this. I'm going to grab the wrapper directive that I have for my template in the Postgres upgrade one so that I can just show you a little bit more of what we can do here. So let's go back over to my terminal and take a look at the... There we go. Nope. Yes, the template. Okay. So let's take a look at templates, UI, pgupgrade.tpl. That's fine. All right. So my wrapper thing here, you'll note that I'm using the RTL bootstrap here, which I had to do a little bit more to get. So if you want bootstrap styles, that's going to be a little bit more effort for you. You can see you get whatever bootstrap you want here. But regardless, you set the style sheets before you do your wrapper directive if you want any extra style sheets. And it's, I don't know, there isn't really much good documentation on loading other style sheets that are shipped with cPanel and WHM. There's several of them, amazingly enough, and some of them even account, like the RTL bootstrap and LTR bootstrap can account for, like, say, different locales where one of them's left to right text, one of them's right to left. In our case here, we're going to just assume, hey, this is a plugin written in English for English speakers. We're not even going to bother localizing it, anything like that, just because we're mostly wanting to make an example here. For doing that sort of stuff, that's more advanced topics. I may go into that again in another video, something like that, to show you how to make a WHM plugin that has both RTL and LTR and all the various bits for localizing your text, along with what type of locale files that you'll actually want to have it localizable. Okay, so this wrapper here, you'll see, is a little bit different than the one that's in the documentation. I don't use some of the things that are there, but I also use some things that aren't there, like this breadcrumb data. So you'll note the icon. Basically, you specify that out on plugins dir, where it tells you to load it earlier. You specify your icon. Going to copy and paste this. Yes, I set my little start sigil here, the bracket %, so that I could start the wrapper. So I'm going to just put that in manually. All right, so let's copy that. We're not going to be bothering with an RTL bootstrap on this occasion, but we are going to... All right, so we have our header that I'm going to set to be, and this locale.make text. Whenever you're doing localization, you're definitely going to want to wrap text that you're going to render in the UI with locale.make text. That's just how the localization system works. But in this case, I don't necessarily need to do that, so I'm going to skip that for now and just turn the header into WHM example thonculator. Alright, so the style sheets equals style sheets. That's if you did some style sheets, so we're not going to worry about that for the RTL bootstrap. Theme is bootstrap, which, you know, is kind of weird that you have to add the RTL one, but it is what it is. It's whatever. Breadcrumb data, here you'll see this previous is an array of, so I'm currently at this app. What are the steps in WHM that I took to get here? And that would be, say, if I went all the way back to WHM, just the basic thing here. So if I go to the classic view and I went to plugins, then I went to PostgreSQL upgrade, basically that's those little interstitial pages that you needed to reach to get there. You know, it's not necessarily anything that's absolutely essential, but it is something that you can do. I certainly like to do that because it makes it look more like a native thing that's in WHM as just a nicety to have. Okay, so let's go back over to our thing here. All right, so, and all you have to do is just give it a name, give it an URL, and that's how you load it. And it's just relative to, the URL is relative to where the cpsys token URL is going to be. Whenever you take a look, you'll see the like cpsys token thing up there, and then basically it's just relative to that. All right, so back to our terminal. All right, so instead of my name, I'm going to make it WHM example plugin. All right, and the, let's see, there's my URL. So, and this name in breadcrumb data is the last little part of it. So if we're naming it WHM example plugin, it's going to show up as WHM example plugin in the breadcrumbs. So now we have the URL, which is just going to be where it is. We're going to change that to example plugin, example plugin.cgi. Right, and our help URL will just be https cPanel.net for now. Why not? Okay. And the icon is going to be example plugin.png because that's what we're going to name it. And we've got the template almost all done. We have to make sure to add our residuals here with an end block because that's how Perl Template Toolkit works. And everything that you want to put in here is going to be either HTML code or Template Toolkit code. All that I'm going to do here is just add in something that says, you know, hello world. You know, may as well have the classic. All right. So now that we have all of that done, we are going to see whether our install.sh works for registering our app config and whether we can actually load our application. So let's go into our other window here. Looks like we just doing a second check that we have everything. I think we do. So let's do sh install. Well, just going to +x the installer. Install .sh. Okay, so we couldn't stat thonkcloud.png. Oh, well, because it's not underscore. Okay, so let's go back to our installer here. And it doesn't matter how many times you run the plugin registrar, it just overwrites the current one, so you can just run it over and over again and it doesn't matter. So let's go back over to our install.sh, and instead of thonkcloud there, it's just thonkcloud.png. Okay, so install sh. You can see it says example plugin registered. That should mean that it loads in WHM. So I'm going to go back to WHM over here. I'm going to go bink, just so it loads, and I'm going to go to plugins. And now you'll note, we have some sort of problem here. What is this? We have the example thonking plugin, but you can see a really freaking huge icon here. What is this? Okay. So one of the things that is neglected to say here is that the icon needs to be, I believe, 48 by 48 pixels, and it's not like an SVG or anything. It's going to be a PNG. There's not really any sort of thing that constrains this, unfortunately. So you're definitely going to have to just resize that yourself and deal with that on your own. So I'm going to do that myself here real quick. I believe. Let's take a look. Search for thonkcloud. Okay. Open with. These are the sorts of things that you generally run into whenever you're doing development, having to either alter some file, not do something with some file. Well, are we going to actually open it? Or are we running OBS so hot and heavy? Applications, graphics, GIMP. Load it. Hey, there we go. Okay, we got Wilbur up here. Let's open it with the GIMP. And I believe it's going to be downloads. Okay, going to be the T's for Thonk Cloud. Thonkcloud.png. Okay, so image. Just going to scale the image because I don't really care. So it's 1000 by 1000. Let's make it 48 by 48. Scale. We. All right. File overwrite. Okay, we overwrote it. Good. Discard changes. Discard changes. All right. So now I'm going to copy that over. Okay. It's now copied over the new one. Going to go back over here and CP. Cloud 2./ Okay. So now we should have a smaller Thonk Cloud icon, and let's run our install.sh. That should mean we now have a smaller icon here, and we will go back. Plugins. Going to dump my cache. Okay, now that I dump my cache, you can see it actually looks right. It's example thonking plugin. Gonna hit the example thonking plugin, and well, what do you know? We have a error here, and I think it's because it's trying to load example.cgi instead of example plugin.cgi. Let's go back and find out where I made a mistake. Okay, so example.cgi. Not seeing it there. Here's example.cgi. What we want instead is example plugin.cgi because that's where it's actually going to be. Okay, done. Rerun my installer. Back over. Refresh the page. Oh, come now. Example plugin.cgi. There we go. Hey, all right. WHM example thonkulator. Hello world. That easy. It's that easy. Well, let's see. How much time did this stream take? Goodness. Almost 40 minutes. Okay. So whenever I say easy, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But regardless, that's how you can set up a WHM plugin that has not only a documentation link, say I load it, gives me cPanel.net. It's got breadcrumbs. It's got everything that you want and that sort of thing. And basically everything, the world's your banana from that point. You just make the template, you make the code, and Bob's your uncle, so to speak. Now, if there's any questions, then I suppose it's a great time to say them right now. But otherwise, I think I will probably go back to my other scene here and wind it down. So let's go over to my work scene. Okay. Looks like there's no questions in the chat, so I think I will wind down the stream. Oh, so the example.plugin is just a placeholder. Correct. Yes, that is correct. Right now this is just a placeholder, but the main point of doing this is so that you have a skeleton to build your plugin on. So whenever you're making this template, you can put whatever HTML, JavaScript, whatever the heck you want within this wrapper. So if I have this, go back to the template here. you have hello world here. You can put any sort of HTML, JavaScript, whatever, as if it was just a normal web page to do whatever it is you want. Let me kind of show you with my plugin that I'm working on kind of where I'm going with that. So we have this PG upgrade template. You can see we have a whole bunch of HTML here. We have you know, something for like select a version, all that sort of stuff. We have a style under here. We also have a script that I'm loading, pgupgrade.js, where I'm telling it, hey, let's do the various things. Now, one of the things you'll note that I was doing here, also, if I take a look at CGI API.cgi, I made my own little API layer for this one. It's just another CGI, but it tries to act more like an API, as in, let's say I go down to the bottom, you can see my little emission subroutine. Instead of saying content type application HTML or like text HTML, I'm doing application JSON because I'm omitting JSON. And so then I can do some sort of JSON post request, get the data in a JavaScript parsable format easily, and just have any sort of back-end stuff that I want to work be done in a relatively straightforward manner to where I don't have to like reload the page all the time. I can make a sort of RESTful application. And now for this API.cgi, you'll note that I had to make another another API conf. Now this one was a lot simpler, because I don't have to have an icon, I don't have anything like that. It's basically just a page that spits out the output. So I just said whost manager, user root, ACLs all, gave it a URL, and it's basically good to go. Because I didn't want it to show up. One of the things that, if we take a look at betterpostgres.conf, the entry URL, now that I'm looking at it, I remember a specific thing that's very important about it. The entry URL gives it it constructs the URL whenever you're in the commander, and WHM's commander is this bar over here, or whenever you're going into plugins, it's the URL that you're going to get whenever you say like hit PostgreSQL upgrade. So whenever you're doing these sorts of things, if you don't actually need an entry in the sidebar or anywhere like that, and you just want some sort of thing that you can hit, you can take a shortcut here with your CGI that you're adding. Just make it a separate plugin, basically. But just don't provide all the details for it to show up in the UI. That way you can hit it from your page with, say, an XML HTTP request, get the data that you want, and you're good to go. Yeah, really not much more to it than that. Let me go back over here. And so, yeah, we have a whole bunch of stuff that you can do here. You see I have a kind of complex form here. This is going to error out or whatever, but I'm just going to hit it anyways. So you can see I even made, with my little APIs here, it's got a install scroller, all that sort of stuff. And I'm using API calls that I made for this thing to get whatever the most recent content is from the backend log that I'm having this send to. And you'll see that it's running like, say, PG upgrade. And you'll see this debug PG CTL workaround step. That's where it's currently dying for me, but it's a plugin that's still in development. But regardless, it kind of shows you what you can do as far as with that sort of model where you have one of your plugins being a UI renderer that has a menu entry, and the other one that, say, doesn't have a menu entry but is just basically an endpoint. So you can get those sorts of responses pretty easily by just doing that. Oh, sorry. Can't see the screen because I didn't change the scene. Okay. So anyways, you see I have this scroller here that I made. So whenever I did my PG upgrade, it basically made a log output that was from the back end. If I go over to my network tab, You can see I had this API module, hey, go get me the newest log thing. Since this bombed out here and it wasn't expecting it, it's still doing the API requests. But you can see kind of the way that I set up my little API thing router here, if you want to say that for lack of a better word. But I'll show you kind of what that will show you. So you can see it just outputs JSON. It tells me, hey, what's this latest upgrade message? There's no new content. It's still in progress. There's no child exit. And here's the next line that we want to look at. So you can get data that looks pretty nice just by rolling your own kind of RESTful endpoint as just a separate plugin. That's mostly the point that I was trying to make here. Yes, very much like other WHM applications. That's kind of the point that I wanted to do was, at least with my application, make it very similar to the other WHM apps, as, of course, since I'm a cPanel employee, full disclosure, I'm not sure how this plugin is going to go, whether it's going to be popular or anything like that. I mean, if that's the case, then we may as well be very similar to what cPanel is doing in case they're like, hey, I want that plugin. Make it to where I can install it in cPanel easily, like add it to some sort of plugin store or something like that if they ever make it. Just, little nice touches like that I just like going for. Anyways, that I think is really all that there is to it. I'm going to wrap up this stream now, and I'm going to call it a day. Okay, thanks for coming and watching the stream. I will call it a day. Thank you very much.